At 4:40 in the morning, Emma Cole found Daisy standing in front of the water trough with foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. The old Holstein was breathing hard. Her nose hovered inches above the water, but she would not drink. "Come on, girl," Emma whispered. Daisy lowered her head. The moment her nose touched the metal rim, she jerked backward. Water splashed across the concrete. Emma frowned. Daisy had been born on the Cole farm 12 years earlier. She had survived 2 difficult winters, a barn fire, and an infection that nearly killed her after her 4th calf. She was not afraid of a water trough. Emma placed one hand on the metal edge. She felt nothing. The water looked clean. No strange smell. No algae. The pump hummed steadily beneath the floor. Behind Daisy, 3 more cows approached. The first stretched her neck toward the surface, then stopped. The second licked a few drops from the wet concrete instead of drinking. The third turned away completely. Emma looked down the row of stalls. The animals were restless. Several had not finished their feed. Their flanks appeared more hollow than they had a week earlier. From the milking room, her father called her name. "Emma!" She gave Daisy one last look and hurried through the swinging gate. Samuel Cole stood beside the milk meter, holding the morning production sheet. His face told her the result before he spoke. Another drop. "How much?" 11% since yesterday. Emma took the sheet. 2 weeks earlier, the herd had produced more than 2,000 gallons every 3 days. Now the numbers were falling each morning. The veterinarian had blamed heat stress. The feed consultant had changed the ration. The equipment company had tested the milking system twice. Nothing had improved. Samuel rubbed both hands over his face. The cooperative called again. What did they say? If we miss another delivery target, they reduce our contract. Emma looked through the milking room window. Daisy was still standing near the trough, still thirsty, still refusing to drink. "We need to call Dr. Warren back," Samuel said. "He already checked them. He can check again. The blood tests were normal. Then we call the feed company. They changed the mineral mix 3 days ago." Samuel's expression tightened. "What do you suggest?" Emma pointed toward the trough. "Watch Daisy." Her father glanced through the window. "She's dehydrated." "I know. Then why isn't she drinking?" Samuel sighed. "Cows stop drinking when they're sick. She drinks outside." He looked at her. "What?" "Yesterday, I saw her drinking from the drainage ditch behind the south pasture. That water is filthy. She drank from it for nearly 2 minutes. Samuel studied Daisy more carefully. The old cow lowered her head again. Her tongue reached toward the water. Then her nose touched the rim. She recoiled immediately. Emma stepped closer to the glass. "That's the 3rd time she's done that." "Maybe the water tastes different. I tested it yesterday." "Then test it again." Samuel handed her the production sheet and returned to the milking line. Emma stayed by the window. The ventilation fans started above the stalls. A second later, the milk cooling unit came alive in the next room. Daisy moved away from the trough. Not slowly. She backed away as if something had struck her. Emma opened the gate and entered the stall area. She filled a plastic bucket from the same trough and placed it on the floor. Daisy hesitated. Then she lowered her head and began drinking. Deep, fast pulls. The same water. The same temperature. The same barn. Only the container had changed. Samuel appeared in the doorway. "What did you do?" "Nothing." He looked at the bucket, then at the metal trough. Emma watched Daisy drink until the bucket was nearly empty. The problem was not that the cows had stopped feeling thirsty. Something was teaching them to fear the place where they were supposed to drink. By noon, 3 vehicles were parked outside the Cole dairy barn. Dr. Warren arrived first. He examined the cows, checked their temperature, studied their eyes, and took blood samples from Daisy and 4 others. "Heat stress," he said. Samuel looked toward the ventilation fans turning above the stalls. "We installed extra fans last month. Fans reduce heat. They don't eliminate it." Dr. Warren recommended electrolytes, more shade, and another round of tests. Emma stood beside Daisy. Would heat stress make them avoid only the metal trough? The veterinarian glanced at the plastic bucket near her boots. Sick animals often develop unusual behavior, but they drink the same water from this. Then keep the buckets available until we know more. He packed his equipment and left. The feed consultant arrived an hour later. He walked the feed lane, opened several bags of mineral supplement, and examined the ration mix that morning. "Could be an imbalance," he said. Too much salt can change drinking patterns. The water intake dropped before we changed the minerals, Emma replied. The consultant lifted a handful of feed. Animals don't always respond immediately. He recommended another ration adjustment. By afternoon, Grant Miller from the equipment company was inside the pump room with a voltage tester and a clipboard. He checked the water pump, the cooling unit, the ventilation controls, and the automatic milking system. Every indicator showed normal operation. No electrical faults, Grant said. Emma leaned against the doorway. Did you test the trough? The trough isn't powered. It's metal. So are the gates. The cows aren't putting their noses against the gates while standing on wet concrete. Grant looked at her for a moment, then laughed, not loudly, just enough for Samuel to hear. You think the water trough is shocking the cows? I think they pull away when they touch it. If there were enough electricity in that trough to bother a 1,200-pound animal, we'd have alarms going off. Would we? Grant held up his meter. This equipment is designed to detect faults. Emma pointed toward the stalls. The cows are detecting something. Samuel stepped between them. Grant, is the system safe? All readings are within normal limits. That's all I need to know. Emma looked at her father. No, it isn't. Samuel lowered his voice. Not now. Grant closed his equipment case. The pump is holding pressure. Water quality is fine. Milking equipment is functioning. Whatever is happening, it isn't coming from our system. He handed Samuel the inspection sheet and left. By sunset, 3 experts had produced 3 explanations: heat stress, feed imbalance, animal behavior unrelated to the equipment. Samuel placed the reports on the office desk. Tomorrow we start the new ration, he said. And if they still won't drink, we wait for the blood results. And if those are normal too? He did not answer. Emma followed him into the barn. Several cows stood near the trough without drinking. One licked water from the concrete where Daisy's bucket had spilled earlier. Samuel watched them. We may have to sell part of the herd, he said. Emma turned toward him. How many? Enough to reduce feed costs. These cows aren't the problem. They're losing production. Because something is wrong in this barn. And 3 professionals just told us what they think it is. 3 professionals who watched the cows from across the aisle. Samuel's expression hardened. You need to stop treating every disagreement like proof that no one respects you. This isn't about me. It sounds like it is. Emma looked toward Daisy. The old cow approached the trough again. She lowered her head slowly. Before her nose reached the metal, the milk cooling unit started behind the wall. Daisy stopped. Then she backed away. Emma checked the clock above the office door. 6:12 p.m. She wrote the time on the back of Grant's inspection sheet. What are you doing? Samuel asked. Watching. That's not a solution. Not yet. Emma stayed in the barn after everyone else left. At 6:45, the cooling unit shut down. Within minutes, Daisy returned to the trough. She still hesitated, but this time she managed several quick drinks before moving away. Emma wrote down the time. At 7:03, the ventilation fans slowed. 2 more cows approached. At 7:15, the barn became quiet. 5 animals began drinking at once. Emma looked toward the pump room. The experts had examined the cows, the feed, and the equipment, but none of them had recorded when the behavior changed. She opened a fresh page in her notebook and drew 4 columns: time, equipment running, cow behavior, water intake. Then she wrote her first conclusion beneath them: they drink when the barn is quiet. Emma began recording the herd before sunrise the next morning. She sat on an overturned feed bucket near the drinking area with a notebook resting on one knee. At 4:52, the first ventilation fan started. 3 cows approached the trough. 2 drank. 1 hesitated. At 5:07, the vacuum pump in the milking room came online. A young Holstein named Penny lowered her nose toward the water, touched the metal rim, and jerked her head back. Emma wrote down the time. At 5:19, the milk cooling unit started. The cows nearest the trough moved away almost together. Emma underlined the entry twice. Rosa Alvarez came through the side gate carrying a bucket of cleaning solution. You've been sitting there all morning? I'm watching when they stop drinking. Rosa looked toward the trough. They always look nervous there now. You noticed it too? I noticed Daisy stretching her neck like she was trying not to touch the edge. Emma closed the notebook. Has anything else changed? Rosa thought for a moment. The cows enter the milking area more slowly. Since when? About 2 weeks. That matched the production decline. Emma followed Rosa into the milking room. The cows moved through the holding gate one at a time, but several hesitated before stepping onto the wet concrete. Daisy planted her front feet and refused to move until Rosa guided her forward. Samuel watched from the control panel. "She's getting old," he said. "She walked in normally last month," Emma replied. "Animals change. So do buildings." Her father gave her a tired look. "Don't start." Emma did not argue. She watched Daisy enter the stall. The old cow shifted her weight repeatedly, lifting one hoof and then another as the equipment ran around her. Emma had seen nervous cows before. This was different. The animals were not reacting to noise. They had lived with pumps, fans, and metal gates their entire lives. They were reacting to contact. When milking ended, Emma followed Daisy back toward the trough. The cow stopped several feet away. Emma placed a plastic bucket beside the metal basin and filled it from the same pipe. Daisy drank from the bucket immediately. Emma moved the bucket closer to the trough. The cow continued drinking. Then Emma lifted the bucket and rested it against the metal rim. Daisy's nose touched the side. She recoiled so quickly that the bucket tipped over. Water spread across the floor. Emma stared at the metal trough. The water had not changed. The cow had not suddenly become less thirsty. Only the point of contact had changed. Grant had said the trough could not be the problem because it was not powered. But the trough was connected to the metal water line. The line passed through the pump room. The pump room shared grounding with the milking equipment and the cooling system. Emma walked to the utility wall and traced the pipes with her eyes. Rosa followed. "What are you thinking?" "That the cows are feeling something we aren't." "Electricity?" "Maybe." Emma placed the back of her hand against the trough. Nothing. She touched the nearby gate. Still nothing. Then she removed one glove and pressed 2 fingers against the damp concrete. A faint tingling passed through her fingertips. So slight she almost dismissed it. She touched the ground again. Nothing. The cooling unit switched on. The tingling returned. Emma stood. "Rosa, touch the gate." Rosa hesitated, then placed one hand on the metal latch. Her expression changed. "You feel it?" "A little." "Like vibration?" "No." Rosa pulled her hand away. "Like pins." Emma checked the clock. 6:03. The cooling unit had started less than 10 seconds earlier. She wrote the time in her notebook. Samuel entered carrying the latest production sheet. "We're down again." Emma held out the notebook. "The cows avoid the trough when the cooling unit runs." Her father barely glanced at the page. "Grant tested it." "He tested the equipment. I don't know whether he tested the difference between the trough and the floor while the system was under load." Samuel looked toward the cooling room. "You're still chasing this?" "Touch the gate." "What?" "Take off your glove and touch the latch." He did, but only briefly. "I don't feel anything. The floor's drier here." "Emma, stand near the trough." Samuel folded the production sheet. "I have a truck coming for feed, 2 workers waiting on payroll, and a cooperative threatening our contract. And the cows are telling us where the problem is. They aren't telling us anything." "They are. We're just not listening." Samuel's face hardened. "Watching animals is not the same as diagnosing an electrical system." Emma looked at Daisy standing beside the overturned plastic bucket. "No," she said, "but it tells us where to test." Her father walked away without answering. Emma waited until he left the barn. Then she returned to the trough with her notebook. She had spent her whole life noticing details other people considered too small to matter. At 9, she had recognized a calf with pneumonia because its ears drooped before it developed a fever. At 14, she found a cracked water line because one patch of bedding stayed darker than the rest. At 19, she stopped a feed mixer before its bearing failed because the motor sounded slightly lower than usual. Each time, the explanation had come later. The first sign was always behavior, a change in rhythm, a pause where no pause had been before. Emma drew a line beneath the morning entries. The cows did not avoid the trough all day. They avoided it during specific combinations of equipment use. That meant the problem was not constant, and if it was not constant, a technician could easily test the barn at the wrong moment and find nothing. At 10:31, only the fans were running. The cows drank. At 10:46, the vacuum pump started. 2 hesitated, but 1 continued drinking. At 11:02, the cooling unit joined the load. Every cow near the trough stepped away. Emma circled the time. There it was again. Not proof, but a pattern. And a pattern was stronger than a guess. She tore a clean sheet from the back of the notebook and wrote 3 words across the top: test under load. Then she went to find a meter. Emma carried 2 clean containers into the barn after lunch. One was a white plastic bucket. The other was a shallow metal pan from the calf room. Rosa watched her place both beside the main trough. "What are you testing? Whether they're avoiding the water or the metal?" Emma filled the bucket directly from the trough. Then she filled the metal pan with the same water. Same source, same temperature, same smell. Daisy approached first. She lowered her head into the plastic bucket and drank without hesitation. Emma waited until the cow had taken several deep pulls. Then she slid the metal pan closer. Daisy stopped. Her nose hovered above the surface. She reached forward, touched the rim, and jerked back. Rosa stared. Emma moved the plastic bucket beside the pan. Daisy returned to it immediately. "The water is the same," Rosa said. Emma nodded. The container changed everything. They repeated the test with 4 more cows. All 4 drank from the plastic bucket. 3 refused the metal pan completely. The 4th tried once, recoiled, then began licking water that had spilled onto a rubber mat. Emma recorded each response. Samuel entered while she was refilling the containers. "What is this? A controlled comparison? It looks like half the barn is covered in buckets. Watch." Emma placed both containers in front of Penny. The cow drank from the plastic one. When Emma moved it away, Penny approached the metal pan, touched the edge, and pulled back. Samuel frowned. She could smell something on it. Emma emptied the pan, scrubbed it, and filled it again from the same pipe. The result did not change. Samuel looked toward the trough. "So, what are you saying? That the water isn't making them sick? You can't prove that with a bucket." "No, but I can prove they react differently to the same water, depending on what they touch." A pickup stopped outside. Grant Miller entered carrying a replacement pressure switch Samuel had ordered the previous week. He saw the containers and laughed. "What happened here?" Emma held out her notebook. "The cows drink from plastic but avoid metal." Grant did not take it. Cows are inconsistent. 5 cows reacted the same way. 5 cows copy each other. Then test it yourself. Grant set down his toolbox. He touched the trough with one hand. Nothing. The cooling unit isn't running. He glanced toward the utility room. "That shouldn't matter. Turn it on." Samuel stepped in. "We're not cycling equipment just to prove a theory. The cows lose water every day we ignore it," Emma said. Grant sighed and walked to the control panel. He activated the cooling unit. The compressor started behind the wall. Emma placed the plastic bucket and metal pan in front of Daisy again. The cow drank from the bucket. She avoided the pan. Grant touched the trough a second time. Still nothing. "You're wearing rubber-soled boots," Emma said. "So are you. I'm not the one drinking with my mouth against the metal while standing on wet concrete." Grant's expression changed, not because he believed her, because he disliked being challenged in front of Samuel. "You took one agricultural wiring course," he said. "I'm not claiming to be an electrician." "Then stop diagnosing electrical faults. I'm diagnosing the behavior, and I'm telling you the system tested within limits." "When?" "This morning." "Was the cooling unit running?" Grant hesitated. "The equipment was tested according to procedure." "That wasn't my question." Samuel raised his voice. "Enough!" The barn went quiet except for the compressor. Samuel turned to Grant. "Is there any possibility she's right?" Grant looked at the trough, then at the cows. "There are situations where grounding issues can create small voltage differences." Emma held his gaze. But nothing here suggests a dangerous fault." "I didn't say dangerous to people." Grant picked up his toolbox. "If the cows were being shocked, you'd see panic." Emma pointed toward Daisy. "They don't need to panic. They only need to learn." Grant shook his head. "You're building a theory around nervous animals." He left the barn with the pressure switch still in his hand. Samuel followed him outside. Emma remained beside the trough. For a moment, doubt crept in. Grant had training, equipment, and years of experience. She had buckets and observations. Then, Daisy approached the metal pan once more. The cooling unit was still running. The cow stretched her neck as far as possible and tried to reach the water without touching the rim. Her tongue barely reached the surface. When her nose finally brushed the metal, she recoiled. Emma did not need the cow to panic. That small movement was enough. She took a basic voltage meter from the maintenance cabinet. One probe went against the metal trough, the other touched the wet concrete. The screen showed 0. Then a number appeared. It vanished before Emma could read it clearly. She adjusted the probes and tried again. 0. A flicker. 0. Rosa leaned over her shoulder. Did it move? Yes? How much? I don't know. The cooling unit shut off. The reading stopped changing. Emma looked at the control panel. The signal was weak, inconsistent, and too brief to convince anyone who already thought she was wrong. But it was there. She wrote one sentence beneath the test results. The fault appears only when the barn is under load. Emma returned to the barn before the evening milking. She placed the voltage meter on an overturned bucket beside the trough and taped one probe against the metal rim. The second probe rested on a damp section of concrete. The screen showed 0. Rosa stood beside her. Maybe Grant was right. Maybe, Emma said. She did not believe it. The cows were already gathering near the holding gate. Daisy approached the trough but stopped before touching it. Emma checked the meter again. 0. The ventilation fans started overhead. The reading remained unchanged. A few cows began drinking. At 5:58, the vacuum pump came online. The screen flickered. 0.3, then 0 again. Did you see that? Rosa asked. Emma nodded. It was not enough. A single unstable reading could come from the meter, a loose probe, or moisture on the floor. She adjusted the wires and waited. Daisy lowered her head. Her tongue reached the water first. She drank carefully, keeping her nose away from the metal rim. Then the milk cooling compressor started. The meter jumped. 1.1. Daisy's nose touched the trough. She jerked backward. The reading disappeared almost immediately. Emma wrote down the time. Again, she said. Rosa looked toward the cooling room. You want me to turn it off? Wait until it finishes its cycle. They watched the cows for several minutes. None approached the trough while the compressor was running. When it stopped, the barn became quieter. The meter returned to 0. Within a minute, 2 cows began drinking. Emma looked at Rosa. Turn the cooling unit on manually. Rosa hesitated. Samuel won't like that. We're not opening anything. We're only starting the normal cycle. Rosa walked to the control panel. The compressor came alive. The meter rose again. 0.8, then 1.2, then 0. One of the cows lifted her head sharply and stepped away from the trough. Emma felt her heartbeat quicken. The signal was small and inconsistent, but the behavior followed it. She moved the second probe from the concrete to the nearby metal gate. The reading changed. She tested the water pipe. Another flicker. Then the stall rail. Nothing. The voltage was not appearing across every metal surface. It seemed strongest between the trough and the wet floor. Rosa touched the gate latch with the back of her fingers. I feel it now. Emma looked up. Clearly? Not painful. Just a little sting. Rosa stepped onto a dry rubber mat and touched the same latch again. Her expression changed. Nothing. Emma wrote that down too. Wet concrete completed the path. Dry rubber interrupted it. Daisy did not wear rubber boots. She stood on damp hooves, lowered her nose to the metal, and completed the path every time she drank. Emma looked toward the cooling room. The cows aren't reacting to the sound. They're reacting when the machine starts, Rosa said, because something electrical changes when it starts. Samuel entered through the side gate carrying a box of medicine. What are you doing with the controls? Rosa stepped away from the panel. Emma pointed to the meter. Watch the screen. Samuel set down the box. I already told you Grant tested the system. He tested it when the cooling unit wasn't under full load. You don't know that? Then let's find out. She asked Rosa to stop the compressor. The number dropped to 0. Daisy approached the trough. She drank 3 times without recoiling. Emma nodded toward Rosa. The compressor started again. The meter rose. Daisy touched the rim and pulled away. Samuel's eyes moved from the cow to the screen. What did that say? Just over 1 volt. Is that dangerous? I don't know. Then what exactly does it prove? That there's a voltage difference where there shouldn't be one. Samuel stared at the trough. 1 volt doesn't sound like much. Not to us. Emma pointed to Daisy. But she's more sensitive around her mouth, and she has to make contact every time she drinks. Samuel watched the old cow standing several feet from the water. His expression did not soften, but he no longer looked dismissive. "Call Grant," Emma said. "He was here yesterday. Ask him to test while the compressor starts." Samuel shook his head. "He already thinks we've wasted his time. We're losing milk every hour. That doesn't make your reading correct. Then let him prove it wrong under the same conditions." Samuel picked up the medicine box. "I'll call him." It was not agreement, but it was the first time he had acted on her evidence. Grant returned 40 minutes later. He entered the barn carrying a professional meter and an expression that made it clear he expected to find nothing. Emma showed him her notes. He barely glanced at them. "You used this meter?" "Yes. It's meant for basic maintenance, not sensitive testing." "Then use yours." Grant connected his equipment between the trough and the concrete. The reading stayed at 0. He looked at Samuel. "There's your answer." "The cooling unit isn't running," Emma said. Grant sighed. "Fine." Rosa started the compressor. The meter changed. Only slightly. Grant adjusted the range and watched again. A number appeared, then vanished. He moved the probe. The reading returned. His expression tightened. "What?" Samuel asked. "Transient voltage. How much?" "Low." "Low enough to ignore?" Emma asked. Grant disconnected the probes. "Low enough that we need to verify the instrument and repeat the test." "You just repeated it." "Once." Emma opened her notebook. "I've recorded it 9 times. With a maintenance meter. And 9 times the cows moved away." Grant looked at her. "That still doesn't prove the voltage caused the behavior." "No," Emma said, "but it proves you didn't test the barn under the condition that causes it." The words hung between them. Grant stood. "We'll inspect the grounding system tomorrow." "Why not now?" "Because it requires shutting down equipment and opening electrical panels. So there is something to inspect. There is always something to inspect." He packed his meter. Samuel followed him toward the door. Emma remained beside the trough. Grant had not admitted she was right, but he had stopped laughing. Daisy approached the plastic bucket Rosa had left nearby and began drinking. Emma watched the cow's reflection tremble on the surface. The experts had searched for a large failure, a dead pump, contaminated water, a sick herd. The first real clue was smaller. A brief number on a meter, a sting too weak for a man in work boots to notice, and a thirsty cow that had learned exactly when not to drink. Grant returned the next morning with another technician and a larger equipment case. This time, he did not laugh when he entered the barn. He moved directly to the electrical room, shut down the cooling unit, and opened the main panel. His assistant checked the grounding conductors while Grant inspected the connections one by one. Emma stood outside the doorway with her notebook. Samuel remained beside her. For nearly an hour, the technicians tested wires, breakers, panels, and motors. Nothing failed. Grant closed the panel. "The grounding connections here are intact." Emma looked toward the water trough. "What about the voltage we measured yesterday?" "Transient readings can come from several sources, such as induced voltage, meter placement, moisture, normal equipment switching." "Normal for whom?" Grant wiped his hands on a cloth. The readings were low. The cows still reacted. "You keep treating animal behavior like a calibrated instrument." Emma opened her notebook. 9 voltage changes, 9 changes in behavior. That is correlation. It's also a pattern. Grant's assistant glanced at the pages, but Grant did not. Samuel stepped forward. "Can the trough shock the cows or not?" "Not from anything we've found." "That isn't an answer," Emma said. Grant looked at her. "No, I do not believe this system is shocking the cows." Rosa, working several stalls away, stopped sweeping. Emma held up the basic meter she had used. "Then start the cooling unit and test where they drink. We already tested yesterday. You tested for a few seconds." Because the reading disappeared. It disappears when the compressor cycle changes. Grant's patience thinned. "You are assuming the compressor causes the problem because the timing happens to match. And you are assuming it doesn't because the panel looks normal." Samuel raised one hand. "Both of you, stop." The cows shifted behind the holding gate. Metal rails rattled against one another. Samuel turned to Grant. "What do you recommend?" "Continue the veterinary testing. Keep the temporary plastic water containers in place. We'll send yesterday's readings to our electrical department." "How long will that take?" "A few days." Samuel looked toward the milk room. They did not have a few days. Production had fallen again that morning. The cooperative had already reduced the value of their next pickup. If the decline continued, the farm would miss another loan payment. Emma saw the calculation on her father's face. "How many cows are you planning to sell?" she asked. Grant's assistant looked away. Samuel did not answer at first. 20. Emma felt her stomach tighten. "Which 20? The lowest producers. They're low because they aren't drinking. They're also costing us feed. You'll sell them sick and get half their value. I know how livestock sales work. Then you know this is the worst possible time." Samuel lowered his voice. "I know we cannot keep paying to feed animals that are giving less milk every day." Grant closed his equipment case. "I'll prepare the service report." Emma stepped in front of the doorway. "Before you leave, test one more thing." Grant stared at her. "The trough against the floor while the cooling unit and vacuum pump are running together. We've already established that the reading is small. You established it appears." "Emma," Samuel warned. She ignored him. "Test at the exact moment the cows refuse to drink." Grant's assistant shifted his weight. "We could run a longer load test," he said. Grant looked at him sharply. "There's no indication of a significant fault." "Then the test will prove that," Emma replied. For a second, Grant said nothing. Then he smiled. It was not the easy laugh from the previous day. It was colder. "You want to run the entire barn around a cow's drinking schedule? I want you to test the condition that produces the problem. You have no electrical certification. I never said I did. You took one course and watched a few cows hesitate at a trough. I watched the same behavior repeat under the same conditions." Grant turned to Samuel. "This is what happens when observations are mistaken for technical evidence." Rosa set down her broom. "She felt it too," Emma said. Grant glanced toward her. Rosa lifted her hand. "The gate stung when the floor was wet." "Static electricity," Grant said. "It stopped when the machine stopped. People notice things once someone tells them what to expect." Rosa's expression hardened. "You're saying she put the feeling in my hand?" "I'm saying expectation affects perception." Emma closed her notebook. "Then don't trust our hands. Trust your meter." Grant picked up the case. "We are done for today." Samuel did not stop him. That hurt more than Grant's words. The technicians walked toward their truck. Emma followed them outside. 20 cows may be sold because you don't want to repeat a test." Grant turned beside the driver's door. "No, 20 cows may be sold because this farm has a serious production problem, and you don't know the cause. Neither do you. At least I'm still looking." His face tightened. "You think everyone here is ignoring you because you are Samuel Cole's daughter?" Emma said nothing. Grant continued. "But people aren't rejecting your theory because of who you are. They are rejecting it because it isn't supported." Emma held up the notebook. "This is support. That is a list of times. It is a repeated pattern. It is not a diagnosis. No. It tells us where the diagnosis should begin." Grant opened the truck door. "When you have a licensed electrician who agrees with you, call me." He climbed inside. The truck pulled away, leaving a thin line of dust over the yard. Emma remained beside the barn. Samuel came outside a moment later. "You shouldn't have followed him." He dismissed the only evidence that matches the cow's behavior. He inspected the system. He inspected the panel. He is responsible for the equipment. And you're responsible for the herd. Her father looked tired rather than angry. "That is why I have to make decisions based on more than your instincts. They aren't instincts anymore. You have a reading no one can reproduce consistently. I reproduced it, with a basic meter on a wet floor. And when it appeared, the cows moved." Samuel glanced toward the livestock trailer parked near the far fence. The trailer had not been used in months. Now its tires had been checked and its gate lowered. Emma followed his gaze. "You already called the buyer. He'll be here tomorrow afternoon. You said 20. That's the current plan. Daisy?" Samuel did not answer. Emma's throat tightened. Daisy was old. Her recent production made her an obvious choice. She raised 6 calves for this farm. She is 12 years old. She is dehydrated because we failed to fix the barn. We don't know that. You don't want to know. Samuel's expression changed. That is not fair. No. What's happening to them isn't fair. He stepped closer. I have listened to veterinarians, nutritionists, technicians, and you. I have spent money we do not have. I am trying to keep this farm alive. So am I. Then stop turning this into a fight about whether people believe in you. Emma looked at him. This became about belief the moment everyone decided the animal's behavior didn't count. Samuel rubbed his forehead. The buyer comes tomorrow. That decision is made. He returned to the barn. Emma stood alone in the yard until she heard the cooling compressor start inside. A few seconds later, metal gates rattled. The cows were moving away from the trough again. She entered through the side door. Daisy stood near the plastic bucket, but it was empty. Emma refilled it and watched the old cow drink. Tomorrow, Daisy might be loaded onto a trailer because no expert had been willing to test the barn at the right moment. Emma looked toward Grant's inspection sheet on the office desk. At the bottom, beneath his signature, he had written, "No hazardous electrical condition detected during inspection." During inspection. That phrase caught her attention. Grant had tested the barn after the morning milking. The cooling tank had already reached temperature, so its compressor had run only in short cycles. Emma opened her notebook. The strongest readings occurred during the first cooling cycle after fresh milk entered the tank. That was when the compressor ran hardest. That was also when the vacuum pump, ventilation fans, wash system, and several other motors operated together. The previous tests had captured pieces of the load, never all of it. Emma turned to the production schedule posted beside the office door. The next full milking cycle would begin at 4 the following morning. She would have less than 10 minutes when every major system overlapped. That was the moment she needed to measure. Not after milking, not during a manual test with one machine running. During the exact conditions the cows experienced twice every day. Rosa entered carrying the empty feed cart. "You all right?" "No." "Grant made you look foolish." "He tried." Rosa leaned against the gate. "What are you going to do?" "Repeat the test tomorrow. Samuel won't let you stop the milking line." "I don't need to stop it." Emma pointed toward the trough. "I need measurements from here, the holding gate, the milk room floor, and the cooling unit at the same time. That's more than one person can do." Emma looked at her. Rosa sighed. "I knew you were going to ask." They spent the final hour of daylight preparing. Emma borrowed 2 meters from neighboring farms. One was old and analog, with a needle that would make brief changes easier to see. The other could record maximum readings during a test. She labeled the leads and secured them so no cow could step on the wires. 1 meter would measure between the trough and the wet floor. Another would measure between the holding gate and the floor. The third would be placed near the cooling room. Rosa checked the connections. "What happens if they all show 0? Then I'm wrong. And if they don't?" Emma looked toward the trailer outside. "Then no one sells a cow until they explain why." Before leaving, she walked through the quiet barn. Daisy stood beneath a fan, chewing slowly. Emma placed a hand against the cow's neck. "They think you're the problem," she whispered. Daisy turned her head toward the empty metal trough, then back toward Emma. The experts had examined blood, feed, water quality, pumps, motors, and control panels. Tomorrow, Emma would test the one thing none of them had taken seriously: the barn as the cows experienced it. Every machine running, wet hooves on concrete, a mouth touching metal, and nowhere for a small current to hide. At 3:48 the next morning, Emma switched on the first meter. The barn was quiet except for the cows shifting in their stalls. Rosa checked the second meter near the holding gate. 0, she said. Emma looked at the third display outside the cooling room. Same here. They had placed the probes before the floor was washed, so they could record the difference between dry and wet conditions. At 4 o'clock, the first cows entered the milking area. The vacuum pump started. The meter beside the gate moved slightly. 0.2 volts. Emma wrote it down. The cows continued forward. At 4:07, the ventilation fans came on. The reading rose to 0.3, then settled. Still low. Still no strong reaction from the herd. Samuel entered the barn carrying the morning schedule. "What are those wires doing there?" "Recording the full load cycle," Emma said. "You could interfere with the equipment. The leads are outside the work path." He looked toward Rosa. "You're helping with this?" Rosa nodded. Samuel's expression tightened, but the milking line was already moving. He had no time to argue. At 4:16, the wash hose opened. Water spread across the concrete near the trough. The meter jumped. 0.6. Daisy approached the water but did not drink. Emma circled the number. "Wet floor increases it," she said. Samuel heard her but continued toward the milking room. Fresh milk began entering the cooling tank. The compressor had not started yet. Emma watched the clock. The strongest readings always appeared during the first heavy cooling cycle. At 4:23, a low mechanical hum came through the wall. The compressor started. All 3 meters changed at once. The gate meter rose to 0.7. The cooling room meter showed 1.0. The trough meter climbed past 1.2. Daisy lowered her head. Her nose touched the metal. She jerked back. The trough meter peaked at 1.5. Rosa stared at the screen. There. Emma looked toward Samuel. He had stopped in the doorway. Another cow approached the trough, stretched her neck toward the water, then stepped away without drinking. The reading held above 1 volt. "Turn off the cooling unit," Emma said. Samuel did not move. "Dad." He crossed to the control panel and stopped the compressor. The readings dropped almost immediately. 0.4, then 0.2, then 0. Daisy returned to the trough. She drank. No hesitation. No recoil. Samuel watched her for several seconds. "Start it again," he said. This time, there was no resistance in his voice. Rosa restarted the compressor. The meter rose. Daisy stopped drinking and pulled away. Samuel looked at Emma. "That's repeatable?" "Yes." He turned toward the cooling room. "What connects that machine to the trough?" "The grounding system. The neutral. Possibly both." "You know which one?" "Not yet." Emma moved the meter probes to the metal water line. The reading was stronger there than on the nearby gate. She tested the stall rail. Almost nothing. The voltage was following a specific path. From the cooling room, into the shared metal system, toward the trough. Emma traced the conduit along the wall. The newer section was clean and properly mounted. Farther down it joined an older line near the wash area. That junction sat low, close to the floor, where steam and cleaning water reached it every day. The metal cover showed a faint rust stain. Emma crouched beside it. "Here," Samuel joined her. "What do you see?" "Corrosion." "That doesn't prove the fault is inside." "No." She placed one probe on the metal cover and one on the wet floor. The compressor started another cycle. The meter jumped higher than before. 1.8. Emma withdrew the probe. "We don't open this ourselves." Samuel looked at her. "You're stopping now?" "I found where the signal is strongest. Opening a live junction is different from testing outside it." Rosa gave a relieved breath. Emma photographed the reading and wrote down the exact time. Then she called an independent agricultural electrician from the neighboring county. He arrived shortly after sunrise. His name was Leonard Price, and unlike Grant, he asked to see Emma's notebook before touching the equipment. He read the entries twice. "You measured this during full milking load?" "Yes." "With the floor wet?" "Yes." "And it disappears when the compressor stops?" "Yes." Leonard nodded. "That's where I'd start." He shut down the cooling unit, locked the breaker, and opened the corroded junction box. Inside, the insulation around one conductor had darkened. A neutral connection was loose. The grounding lug beneath it was green with corrosion. Leonard touched neither one until he had verified the power was off. Samuel stood behind him. "Could that send voltage to the trough?" "Under heavy load, yes. How much?" "Depends on resistance, moisture, and what equipment is operating. Enough to create a voltage difference between grounded metal and wet concrete." Emma looked toward the cows. "Enough for them to feel?" Leonard glanced at Daisy. "Especially around the mouth and nose." Samuel lowered his head. For 2 weeks the herd had been blamed for acting strangely. They had not been acting strangely. They had been avoiding pain. Leonard pointed to the damaged connection. "This fault probably became worse gradually. That's why your normal equipment checks didn't show a complete failure." Emma looked at the meter still fixed beside the trough. The problem had never appeared as a dead motor, tripped breaker, or warning alarm. It appeared as timing. The vacuum pump, the wet floor, the cooling compressor, a cow touching metal. Each part alone looked harmless. Together, they created the pattern no one had bothered to measure. Samuel turned to Emma. "Call the buyer." She held his gaze. "You call him." Her father nodded. Then he walked toward the office telephone. The livestock trailer remained beside the fence. But no cows would be loaded into it that morning. Leonard shut off power to the cooling system and removed the damaged connection. The neutral wire had loosened inside the corroded junction box. Under light use, the system appeared normal, but when the compressor started under heavy load, current searched for another path. Part of that path ran through the shared metal piping toward the water trough. Leonard replaced the damaged conductor, cleaned the grounding point, and installed a new weatherproof enclosure above the wash line. Then, he tested the barn again. Vacuum pump running. Ventilation fans on. Cooling compressor under full load. Wet floor. The meter between the trough and the concrete stayed at 0. Emma watched the screen for nearly a minute. No flicker. No sudden rise. Nothing. Grant returned before the final test was finished. Samuel had called the equipment company and asked him to witness the repair. Grant entered the barn carrying the same professional meter he had used before. His eyes moved from Leonard's tools to the open junction box. "What did you find?" he asked. Leonard pointed to the removed wire. "Loose neutral connection. Corroded ground. The fault appeared under combined load." Grant examined the damaged fitting. "Our panel test was normal." "The panel was normal," Leonard said. "The remote junction wasn't. We checked the equipment grounding. Not while the full system was operating on a wet floor." Grant looked toward Emma. She said nothing. Leonard connected Grant's meter to the trough. "Start the compressor." Rosa activated the cooling unit. The meter remained at 0. Grant adjusted the range and tested again. Still 0. Leonard handed him a photograph Emma had taken earlier. The display in the image showed the higher reading beside the exact time. Grant compared it with the production schedule. "That was during morning milking?" "Yes," Emma said, "when the vacuum pump, fans, wash system, and cooler were running together." He looked at the notebook in her hand. "You recorded every cycle?" "For 4 days." Grant turned several pages. The times matched. The voltage rose when the combined load increased. The cows stopped drinking during the same periods. When the equipment shut down, the reading disappeared and the herd returned to the trough. The pattern was too consistent to dismiss. Grant closed the notebook. "The fault was intermittent." "No," Emma said. "The conditions were intermittent." He looked at her. "The fault was there every time the right conditions appeared. You kept testing when they didn't." Samuel stood near the office door. "So the machines were working?" "Yes," Leonard said. "And the water was clean?" "Yes." "And the cows weren't sick?" "Not from a disease causing this behavior." Samuel looked toward Daisy. The old cow stood near the plastic bucket Rosa had placed on the floor. For days, every expert had examined one part of the problem. The veterinarian studied the animals. The nutritionist studied the feed. Grant studied the machinery. Each looked for a failure inside his own field. Emma had watched the point where all 3 systems met. A living animal, wet concrete, metal equipment, a machine under load. That intersection was the one thing they had missed. Leonard removed the plastic bucket from beside the trough. Daisy watched him carry it away. Then she approached the metal basin. The cooling compressor continued running behind the wall. Emma held her breath. Daisy lowered her head. Her nose touched the rim. She paused. For a moment, it seemed the memory of the shock might stop her even after the current was gone. Then she drank. Slowly at first. One mouthful, then another. The meter remained at 0. A second cow approached, then a third. Within minutes, the trough was surrounded. The animals pressed shoulder to shoulder, drinking deeply without jerking away. Samuel watched from the aisle. "They were thirsty the entire time," he said. Emma nodded. "They just learned that drinking hurt." Grant stood beside the repaired junction box. "We should have tested during full operation." Emma looked at him. "You should have watched the cows before deciding their behavior was irrelevant." He did not argue. Outside, the livestock buyer's truck passed the farm without turning into the drive. Samuel had canceled the sale. Inside the barn, the sound of the herd drinking rose above the machines. The experts had searched for a broken component. Emma had found a broken connection between what the equipment reported and what the animals experienced. Leonard refused to restore power immediately. "The damaged connection is only one part of the problem," he said. "Before we restart anything, I want every metal surface in this barn checked." Grant looked toward the cooling tank. "How long will that take?" "As long as it takes to make sure the current has nowhere else to go." Fresh milk was still entering the tank, but without the cooling system, its temperature had begun to rise. Samuel checked the gauge. "We can't leave the compressor off all morning." Leonard gathered his test leads. "Then find temporary refrigeration. I'm not energizing this system until the grounding path is safe." Samuel called the cooperative, but their collection truck was hours away. Rosa contacted a neighboring dairy. They had room for part of the milk, but not all of it. Emma studied the storage lines. "We can move the first batch next door and fill the transport tank with ice water around the outer jacket." Grant shook his head. "That won't hold long. It doesn't need to hold all day." She looked at Leonard. "How much time?" "Give me 90 minutes." Samuel began assigning workers. For the next half hour, the farm split into two emergencies. Outside, milk was transferred into a clean transport tank and driven to the neighboring dairy. Inside, Leonard tested the trough, gates, stall rails, water pipes, and milking equipment under simulated load. Emma stayed beside him with her notebook. At each point, he measured the difference between metal and concrete. Most readings remained near zero. Near the wash station, one gate showed a slight change. Leonard traced it to an old bonding wire that had nearly separated from its clamp. "It may not have caused the main problem," he said, "but it could have become the next one." He replaced the connection. Grant watched without speaking. The original inspection had focused on whether each machine operated correctly. Leonard was testing whether every connected surface remained safe while the machines operated together. That was the difference Emma had been trying to explain. At the water trough, Leonard connected a recording meter and asked Rosa to wet the floor exactly as she did during morning cleaning. Then he turned on the systems one by one. Ventilation fans, vacuum pump, wash equipment, cooling compressor. The meter held steady. He repeated the sequence. Still nothing. Grant tested with his own instrument. 0.02, he said. "Within normal background variation," Leonard replied. Samuel looked toward Daisy. "Is it safe?" "It is safe according to the readings." Emma shook her head. "Not finished." The men turned toward her. "We measured the barn," she said. "Now we test whether the cows behave differently." Grant sighed. "You already proved the electrical fault." "We proved the reading is gone. The herd has been avoiding that trough for 2 weeks. Fear learned over days might not disappear with one repair." Emma removed every plastic bucket except one emergency container at the far end of the barn. Then she opened the gate. Daisy entered first. She approached the trough but stopped 2 feet away. The machines continued running. The meter remained at 0. Daisy stretched her neck toward the water. Her nose almost touched the metal, but she pulled back before contact. Samuel's face fell. "It didn't work." "The current is gone," Leonard said. "The memory isn't," Emma replied. She dipped her hand into the water and let it run from her fingers. Daisy watched. Emma stepped away. For nearly a minute, the cow did not move. Then she reached forward again. Her nose touched the rim. She froze. Nothing happened. Daisy took one small drink, then another. A younger cow approached beside her and began drinking without hesitation. Daisy followed. Soon both animals were pulling water deeply from the trough. The recording meter stayed flat. Samuel released the breath he had been holding. Leonard turned toward Grant. "Now the test is complete." Grant looked at Emma. "Electrical confirmation and behavioral confirmation. Both matter," she said. Outside, the transport tank returned from the neighboring dairy. The remaining milk had stayed within the acceptable temperature range. No batch was lost. No cows were sold. Before Leonard left, he handed Samuel a list of repairs and inspection intervals. Every grounding connection would be checked regularly. Every junction near moisture would be sealed. Voltage testing would be performed during full equipment load, not only when the barn was quiet. Samuel passed the document to Emma. "You manage it." She looked at him. "The maintenance schedule?" "The whole system." It was the first time he had given her responsibility before a problem occurred, rather than asking for help after something failed. Emma folded the paper and placed it inside her notebook. Behind them, Daisy continued drinking from the metal trough. The repair had taken less than 2 hours. Finding the reason to make it had taken 2 weeks. By the next morning, the plastic buckets were gone. The repaired cooling system ran at full load. The vacuum pump hummed, the fans turned overhead, and wash water left the concrete damp around the trough. Emma stood beside the meter. 0. Daisy approached first. She slowed near the metal rim, remembering what had happened there. Then she lowered her head and touched the trough. Nothing. She drank. Not cautiously this time. Deep, steady pulls. A second cow joined her, then another. Within minutes, The entire side of the trough was crowded. The barn filled with the sound of water moving and animals swallowing. Samuel watched from the milking room. "They haven't done that in weeks," he said. Emma checked the meter again. Still 0. By the afternoon milking, the cows entered the holding area with less hesitation. Feed intake improved. The restless pacing near the gates began to disappear. The production numbers did not recover immediately, but they stopped falling. That mattered. For the first time in 2 weeks, the farm was no longer losing ground. Samuel stood beside Emma as they reviewed the evening sheet. "Up 3%, he said. "It'll take time." "I know." He looked toward Daisy, now drinking without fear. "I almost sold her." Emma closed the notebook. "You believed the reports. I believed the people I thought knew more. They knew their part." Samuel nodded slowly. "But you saw the whole problem." The next morning, production rose again. By the end of the week, the herd was eating normally and drinking at every trough. The cooperative withdrew its warning, and the livestock trailer was moved back behind the equipment shed. Grant returned to observe the final full-load test. He watched the cows drink while every major system operated. No hesitation, no recoil, no voltage. "This should have been part of our first inspection," he said. Emma looked at the crowded trough. "Yes." Grant waited for more, perhaps expecting anger or satisfaction. Emma gave him neither. The cows drinking again was enough. The farm had not been saved by a dramatic machine failure or an expensive new system. It had been saved by one repeated movement everyone else had dismissed, a thirsty animal lowering its head, touching metal, and pulling away. 3 days later, Grant returned with a revised service report. He found Emma beside the trough, checking the new monitoring log. "I changed the conclusion," he said. She took the report. The original line, "No hazardous electrical condition detected," had been removed. In its place, Grant had written, "Intermittent stray voltage occurred under combined equipment load due to a loose neutral connection and corroded grounding point." The fault was identified through repeated behavioral observation and load-timed testing. Emma read the final sentence twice. Her name appeared beneath it. "You didn't have to include me," she said. "Yes, I did." Grant looked toward the cows. "We tested the machines separately. You noticed the problem only appeared when the whole barn was operating, and when the floor was wet, and when the cows touched the trough." He nodded. "That will be added to our inspection procedure." Samuel joined them carrying the latest production figures. The herd was nearly back to its previous output. The cooperative had restored the farm's full contract, and the buyer who had planned to take 20 cows had not returned. Grant handed Samuel a copy of the report. "I owe both of you an apology." Samuel looked at Emma. Mostly her. Grant accepted that. "I thought she was trying to turn an observation into a technical diagnosis." "I was trying to show you where to test," Emma said. "I know that now." Later that afternoon, representatives from the dairy cooperative arrived to review the incident. Samuel led them through the barn. When they reached the repaired junction box, one of the men asked who had discovered the fault. Samuel did not point to Grant. He did not mention the veterinarian or the feed consultant. He looked at Emma. "My daughter found it." Emma waited. Samuel corrected himself. "Emma found it." The cooperative manager asked how. She showed him the notebook. Not the final report. Not the professional meter. The notebook containing times, equipment cycles, and the repeated reactions of the herd. "The readings told us electricity was present," she said. "The cows told us when to look for it." The manager studied the pages. "We have older barns with similar equipment." "Then test them under full load," Emma said, "and don't wait for production to fall before watching how the animals drink." Before leaving, Grant stopped beside the trough. "You were right about one more thing." "What?" "The equipment was functioning." Emma looked at him. "That was the problem. We thought functioning meant safe." The cows continued drinking behind them. A week earlier, Grant had laughed at the idea that a metal trough could be responsible for the farm's losses. Now he was carrying Emma's notes back to his company to teach other technicians how not to miss the same fault. Emma did not need him to feel embarrassed. She needed him to remember. Within a month, the coal dairy had returned to normal production. Emma created a new inspection routine for the barn. Voltage checks would be performed during full milking load, with the floor wet and every major system operating. Grounding connections near wash areas would be inspected regularly. Any change in drinking, feeding, or movement would be recorded instead of dismissed as stubborn behavior. Samuel gave her responsibility for the equipment and herd monitoring program. This time, she was not brought in after something failed. She was trusted to prevent the next failure. Emma kept the old voltage meter in the barn office beside her notebook. It was not the most accurate instrument they owned, but it had recorded the first flicker everyone else ignored. On the final page she wrote, "Watch the animals before assuming the machines are right." Outside the office, Daisy approached the metal trough. The cooling compressor started. The fans turned overhead. Wet concrete reflected the barn lights. Daisy lowered her head and drank without hesitation. The meter remained at 0. The experts had studied the feed, tested the water, examined the cows, and inspected the equipment. Emma had done something simpler. She watched the moment the animal touched the machine. That was where the truth had been hiding. The cows could not explain what was hurting them. They had already provided the evidence. Someone only had to believe that their behavior meant something,